Did you know Trump publicly urged Fed Chair Kevin Warsh to cut rates ahead of his first major meeting? Today's top economic headline in Trump world. President Trump publicly called on newly installed Federal Reserve Chair Kevin Warsh to cut interest rates sharply, pushing for rates to 1% or below, even as inflation and war-related energy shocks remain in focus. The Financial Times reports Trump made these comments in an interview context as Warsh heads into his first Federal Open Market Committee meeting as chair, scheduled for June 16, 17. This is significant because it places the president in open rhetorical conflict with the traditional expectation of Fed independence, even when presidents insist they want the Fed to be independent. Trump's argument is simple and politically powerful. Lower rates mean cheaper borrowing. Cheaper borrowing supports home buyers, business investment, and consumer spending. In a high-cost environment, cut rates sounds like relief, but the Fed's job is not to maximize political comfort. The Fed's job is to manage inflation and stabilize the economy across cycles. When inflation is elevated, rate cuts can increase price pressure by increasing demand. The FT notes the benchmark policy rate range is around 3.5% to 3.75%, and it also references inflation pressure tied to energy disruptions connected to the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz situation. That matters because energy-driven inflation is uniquely dangerous in politics and economics. It hits households fast, it influences transport and food costs, and it feeds expectations. If people believe prices will keep rising, they act in ways that make inflation harder to bring down. So when Trump pressures Warsh to cut, it creates a two-track dynamic. Political track. Voters here make money cheaper. Economic track. Markets ask, does inflation allow it? There's also a credibility track. If markets believe the Fed is being politically influenced, they may demand higher returns to hold U.S. debt, which can raise borrowing costs across the economy. That's why Fed independence has been treated as a pillar of financial stability. But the story is not as simple as Trump bad, Fed good. Many Americans experience the Fed as the institution that made mortgages expensive and slowed growth. The Fed is structurally unpopular when rates are high, so political pressure on the Fed can be popular, even if it is risky. Here's what makes today's moment real. Warsh is not just a symbol. He is about to chair a meeting where the Fed must signal its next move, and markets will interpret every word. The FT report also suggests some officials have floated the possibility of a rate hike if inflation persists. That means the internal policy debate is not settled on cuts. So Trump's pressure is pushing against a current where some policymakers may feel inflation is still too hot. Now, what does Trump gain by saying this publicly? Narrative control. If the economy slows, Trump can say the Fed didn't help. Credit claim. If the economy improves, Trump can claim his pressure was part of it. Populist alignment. I'm fighting the high-cost system. But what does Trump risk? Market instability. Any perceived politicization can spook markets. Inflation rebound. If rates cut too soon, prices rise again. Institutional conflict. A public battle with the Fed becomes a persistent headline. For everyday Americans, this story shows up as three things. Mortgage rates tied to expectations about Fed policy and bond yields. Credit costs for car loans, credit cards, and small business lines. Jobs. If rates stay high, hiring can slow. If rates fall too fast and inflation returns, the Fed may later tighten aggressively, causing deeper pain. That's why rate policy is such a potent political issue. It reaches people without them ever watching a Fed press conference. What should viewers watch next? Warsh's first major messaging. Does he project independence, caution, or a willingness to move quickly? Inflation prints and energy prices. If energy shocks persist and inflation stays elevated, cutting is harder. Market expectations leading into June 16 to 17. Bond yields, mortgage rates, and equity volatility will all indicate which scenario markets believe. The FT's reporting highlights how Trump's call for dramatic cuts is colliding with inflation realities tied to war-driven energy dynamics. This is a classic Trump story in economic form. A forceful demand, a powerful institution, and a national debate over whether relief now is worth risk later. Today's story was about Trump's influence on Federal Reserve interest rate decisions.